Alright, we all knew this was coming. This is me we're talking about, and this has been requested a few times anyway, so it's time to get to it. Today's another twofer, guys. Join me for a closer look at Monster Rancher Battle Cards Episodes 1 and 2. Yeah, no messing around this week. We have a lot of ground to cover. Greetings everyone, this is the Hipster Snack, and today we're going to be looking at the two Monster Rancher Battle Card titles as we bring this installment of Month to its close. And for those wondering where my reviews of the Pokemon and Digimon card games are, well, you're going to need to wait a little bit longer. Unlike this particular monster-themed card game, I never actually played any of those. Whoops. Looks like I'll be begging Gym Leader Ed for help again in the not-too-distant future. Anyway, the original Monster Rancher Battle Card game debuted on the Game Boy Color in December of 1999. We learned that children too small to handle real monsters tend to get into the game as a way of learning about monsters and their abilities, and apparently have entire theme attractions, the ruins, built specifically to keep the little Rugrats entertained with something to do. Alright, point of clarity, I'm admitting that the game doesn't actually tell you this point blank, but honestly, they allow small children to play in ruins and run around knowing that there's traps and uneven terrain and stuff. You can't tell me that this isn't some kind of weird dungeon-themed theme park instead of the entire Monster Rancher world adult population being guilty of gross negligence. Anyway, that's what I assume they're built for. And if you collect every single card in the entire game, you even have the right to present your collection to establish yourself as a full-on monster breeder in your own right. The logistics of this are somewhat suspect, but that's what they tell us. So you begin the journey by picking your protag, male or female, and taking a little personality quiz. The opposing protagonist then becomes your default rival for the game, but they aren't that big of an influence either way. Then you get to take a little personality quiz of 10 questions. Unlike the quiz in Monster Rancher 2, this one actually has a mechanical effect. That being that it decides your starting deck from one of three options: the Power, Miracle, or Speed teams. I think they're all good, so just get whatever one you like and kick the game off. To start, the game looks alright. I mean, it's a Game Boy Color game. I've said it before and I'll say it again, it is what it is. It uses the processing power it has to make the cards look as good as it possibly can, and it keeps the overworld dungeons fairly simplistic, which I think is the best choice, given that the cards are the real attraction over the randomly generated dungeon zones. But they get the job done. From an audio standpoint, the game uses MIDI renditions of familiar Monster Rancher tunes, creating a kind of thematic continuity found within, with some town themes and battle anthems reprising their use in the card-based installment. It's all pretty well done, and I like the shoutouts to the PS1 titles along the way. Alright, let's get into this, because this explanation is going to be the bulk of the review, so take notes, there's going to be a quiz afterward. All decks have two major components. It has 3 monster cards which act as the figurehead of the deck. The deck itself is comprised of attack, tamer, and item cards totaling 50. The monster cards have an HP stat showing their overall durability, the highest starting value being 10, and a designation as either a ground, G, or aerial, A, monster. Then we flip a coin to see who goes first. At this point, both players will draw until they have 5 cards in their hand. They'll do this any time that they do not have 5 cards in their hand and their turn comes up. In the flow of a normal game, it's unlikely cards will be played in the first turn, seeing as how most require a guts cost. How do you build guts? Well, that's simple. For starters, the player that goes second will get a mini guts phase, where they can discard up to 2 cards and get rewarded that many guts in return. More commonly, you'll enter a guts phase every turn. The player can then discard from their hand to the discard pile as many cards as they want, getting +1 guts points for each card distributed in this fashion. So you might think, great, I'll just spend a few turns dumping all 5 of my cards each turn and I'll be set to go. Well, you're welcome to do that, but if you're ever unable to complete a hand of 5 cards during your draw phase, you also deck out and lose. So gathering guts versus using cards is the delicate balancing act you'll have to conduct the entire time you're playing. This also gets more complicated, as once you have guts energy to spend, you can activate monster attacks by playing an attack card corresponding to one of your monsters. Oh right, I guess I need to mention this as well. There's also hybrid monster cards, much like there are mixed monsters in the games proper. If your monster is a hybrid, it can use cards from both base species. So for example, if I had Allure, who is a Pixie/Naga, I could then use both Pixie and Naga species cards with her. However, there's only a very small pool of these to be found in the GBC title, so I'm going to continue operating under the assumption that you'll never have these on hand. So, you activate your attacks. You can trigger as many attacks a turn as you want, given a few restrictions. 1. You have to have the guts to fund the cards you want to use. 2. With a couple of exceptions, most monsters can only activate one attack per turn, unless the card says otherwise. And 3. You actually have that many attack cards on hand. See, monster-related cards aren't exclusively just attacks, they include defense abilities as well. There are cards that can reduce incoming damage, or even evade it completely. So keeping cards and guts on hand while on the defensive works to your advantage as well. The idea is you want to defeat your enemy's 3 monsters without running out of cards. Ultimately, these 2 conditions determine who will win. And since the Game Boy Color has no monster generation functionality, instead you get cards by clearing ruins, which will give you random rewards each time, and later in the game you can even bet ante. The rarer the card you put up, the better the prize you'll receive, because it's never too early in life to introduce chillins to the joys of gambling. Also later on, certain items can be traded for certain rare cards, but I'm not going to get too much into that. In fact, let's sidestep that for a moment and talk about the items in this game, because there's a lot of them, and each and every one of them has one and precisely only one mechanical implementation for each of them. Like, there's 4 or 5 types of shoe items, each one helping you surmount one type of difficult terrain that would otherwise wall you off. Or the 4 or 5 shovel items, or the, okay, this needs to be said. The card game mechanics are good, and they're fun, but the rest of the game comes off as excessively, needlessly complex. In fact, the thing that really stops me from playing the first Battle Cards game is this clunky, excessive item system. And these aren't even passive items that you'll need to get one time, but then yield the benefit in perpetuity. They're all consumables, which you can run out of, and need to activate every single time you want to use them in each instance. This makes the fact that the dungeons are already randomly created upon entry more frustrating. Plus, there's only 10 main breed cards and 6 hybrid monster cards in the game. So most of the time, you're not even fighting in the name of the coolest possible cards of the game. Instead, you're usually going to get something like a pixie kick card or something. And it can make the entire thing feel a bit more frustrating than rewarding. So it's a good thing there's a sequel, am I right? Yes, wrapping this month up nicely in a parallel to Pokemon Pinball, Monster Rancher Battle Cards Episode 2 on the PlayStation 1 debuted a year later, and serves somewhat as direct sequel to the events of Monster Rancher 2. The game opens on ranch assistant Colt's birthday, and the player conspiring with Master Pabs to give her a rare Phoenix card, a family heirloom from the player's father, apparently. Seems a little melodramatic, but whatever. Colt is then also gifted the Monster Plate, a stone slab with a slot for each of the game's 20 main species monster cards. Once filled with all present parties' worth of monster cards, including your gift to the Phoenix card to round it out, it suddenly bursts into a sheer light, and Colt vanishes. Master Pabs, Colt's friend Q, and the player are left dumbfounded and speculate that an old myth about a paradise of monsters must be true and that Colt must have been taken there. And tempting as it may be to leave her in such straits, the team goes to the Monster Card Association, or MCA, and get a new starter deck in similar fashion to the first game. You do a little quiz, you get a deck based on your answers, and the game kicks off. And rather than messing around with overworlds and dungeons and the like, the game handles similarly to a traditional, menu-driven Monster Rancher title, with us picking to battle whoever we'd like, whenever we'd like. Q serves as convenient function of always using a copycat deck to whatever you bring to the table, a neat way of checking to see how your deck flows and its overall balance. As the game goes on, random challengers will come to you, filling out a roster of anime-inspired rivals to your dwelling, and the tournaments and traditional letter ranking are available each in-game month. However, you don't need to climb the ranks in usual fashion. You're free to choose whichever your heart desires if you think you can beat them. These tournaments will serve as an excellent opportunity to grind for the monster cards you don't have, or the skill cards for the breeds that you do. And while the system is grindy, this feels like it's a more definitive Monster Rancher Battle Cards experience. There's less messing around between card games, you can save anytime you're not in battle, and Q courteously offers up her limitless supply of critical cards as free ante, preventing your deck from ever falling into unusable status. It just feels better thought out, and the general flow of the game is interrupted much less. This allows you to build and refine your deck a lot more cohesively, especially as once you unlock the Phoenix card, getting hybrid monsters becomes much easier, and there's 25 of them this go around, meaning that they're much more conducive for strategic team building. The core game mechanics remain intact, with strong emphasis put on your deck building and having the right amount of breeder cards to support your monster's natural abilities. Also, I don't need to repeat that long-winded tutorial from above because that's core gameplay. If I did have a complaint about episode 2, it's just that, as said, it is grindy, and it can be a bit tight-lipped about what you need to do in order to progress. But a determined card reader can find their way through it with a little persistence. All in all, both Monster Rancher Battle Cards games are pretty solid, and I'd say they hold up to this day. While no physical copy was ever available in the English-speaking world, and I'm not even certain if even Japan ever had one, these games are still excellent means I wish to enjoy it for yourselves, and I recommend you do precisely that. On that note, we're bringing Mons Month for this year to its close. This has been the Rancher Snack. If you liked today's episode, hit the like button so I know. Leave a comment down below. What was your go-to team in these games? I had pretty good success using a beefy Golem Plant Zilla defensive deck. Tell me your strategies too. And for more like this 5 days a week, hit the subscribe and bell icon so you'll never miss a one. There's more obscure reviews, NDX, Snack Tech, and the new home of the Tomodachi Bros Review podcast all right here. Join me here for each of them, and I will see you there.